Hi, good morning all. Really pleased to welcome Hannah Burrow from Kiroku today. So this is today's edition of Hive Five. We'll be going through five really topical questions. But yeah, welcome today, Hannah.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's fantastic. So yeah, probably the first thing if we can kick off, if that's all right. T tell us who you are and what Kiroku are.
Perfect. So I'm Hannah. I qualified as a dentist 10 years ago, and about 7 years ago, started a business called Kiroku. So together with my co-founder, we created Kiroku to reduce the amount of time that clinicians have to spend on record keeping. As dentists, we have to spend a huge amount of our time writing up notes at the end of appointment and doing it quite protective, way quite often. And so we wanted to create technology which just allowed you as the dentist just to focus on the patient in front of you and kind of hand over all of that admin to us.
Fantastic. So you mentioned kind of the technology. Am I right in saying that there's kind of AI that underpins
A huge amount of
underpins
AI.
what you do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so probably just to kind of go back to basics then, would it be okay if you kind of describe what AI is in a simple version as you possibly can? And
I I absolutely, yeah, very happy to. I will make clear that I have learned a lot about AI from working with Jay, but he really is the one who is super knowledgeable about this. But AI is something that has been going on for decades and decades, but has really had a huge resurgence, or not resurgence, surgence in the last couple of years, and people have become really aware of it because of generative AI, because of the large language models like ChatGPT, like Google's version, which is called Gemini. But this has been going on for decades and decades. And really, what it is teaching a computer to do something intelligent. That's like at its most basic form. But this has obviously progressed and progressed and progressed. And so it might actually just be things like calculations. Anything that's repetitive is what computers are going to be very, very good at doing. What's kind of really transitioned in the last couple of years with
yeah,
these really large language models is its perceived understanding of language.
yeah,
And I'm sure a lot of people have interacted with ChatGPT, and that's trained off millions, billions of data on the internet. And from that, it's been able to acquire all this knowledge so that if you ask it a question, it will give a really kind of intelligent response. And that is an area of AI that's called natural language processing, which is really focused on language. But you can do the same thing with images. Again, people may have used similar technologies, asking it to create images and things like that. But you can also apply knowledge to images as well. So training models to be able to pick up, um, let's say, pathology on a pathology slide, for example, to a better level of accuracy than a human can. And that's an area called well, that's more focused on images. So there's different areas to it.
yeah. Probably my perception. I don't know if I quite got this right. ChatGPT came with this kind of thunder, probably
Mm,
almost to the kind of the tune, the way the kind of the first iPhone came in. In
yeah.
reality, I don't think it was a revolution in itself, as you kind of described in there. It's just been a massive evolution, but it's probably got to this point where ChatGPT probably made it kind of slightly more applicable. Is that a fair way of
I
describing
think
it?
I think it made it more applicable, but I would actually say in of itself it is actually a huge like progress as well. Like all of these language models, and I think it's kind of made possible by all the data that exists on the internet, but also the increase in computing power, because
Yeah,
so many of these things wouldn't have been possible without like these microchips that support it.
yeah,
So what you can now do, so to give you an idea, when Kiroku started as a business, we were focusing on could you write the notes from this like the spoken conversation that a dentist was having
yeah,
at that point when we started the business 7 years ago. We were having to build all of those language models ourselves, so
yeah,
everything from the ground up. Here we are 7 years later, and what
yeah.
we can do is we can configure what is already there, so it just completely changes how these things can be applied by different
Wow.
businesses, but by different sort of industries as well.
Yeah. Well, that leads on kind of very nicely. So, how does AI lend itself to dentistry, and how is it starting to be applied?
I think it's Yeah, it's a really, really interesting time for AI just in every industry because it's one of those points in history, I think, where actually we're limited by our imagination on how we're using the AI rather than the actual technology itself. So it's suddenly you can apply it to so many different things. In dentistry, there's so many areas of inefficiency, and so many areas where AI can just kind of strengthen what we're doing as clinicians. And so, I mean, obviously, as at Kiroku, we're really focusing on the admin. That's one area where, as clinicians, we spend a huge amount of time on repetitive tasks. But there's so many other things like there's examples of radiographic analysis. So again, that might be something that a dentist can do kind of without really thinking necessarily, but having AI support your diagnoses or kind of, you know, give you an extra set of eyes, basically, that can be really, really supportive in helping a patient understand their diagnosis. And then there's so much of the kind of back office admin that is also being addressed massively with AI as well. So it really is, and they're just the application so far. I think if we have this conversation in 6 months' time, it'll be a few extra things as well.
Developing at such a fast pace is that's unbelievable. I can really and definitely see how every efficiency we're really looking for, and
Mm.
every improvement. It's not even just an efficiency; it's an improvement in the service that we're providing to our patients in dentistry, improvements in other areas outside of dentistry and other sectors as well. So, how does this does this help economically to practices? Is there I want to believe there's a kind of a massive financial benefit here as well.
So yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think it's an easy one as you're particularly as these technologies are so new to be a principal who is kind of being very innovative and introducing them. I think um, you've almost got to do a cost analysis on how much these inefficiencies are costing you as a practice. Because I think, introducing any technology, there's going to be a cost involved. So what needs to be done by each business is understanding, let's say, okay, in the example of radiographic analysis, how much treatment is actually not being taken up? And do we understand why that's not being taken up? Is it because patients don't fully understand the diagnosis, or is it a different reason? And then you can actually almost do the calculation for yourself. But there's a huge amount of we know that the treatment conversion can always be improved. So that's like one big area.
Definitely.
And I do think it's worth kind of doing the analysis of what the cost is to your practice of not doing something. Otherwise, I think it's easy to see a price tag of a new technology and therefore dismiss it, but be left behind in doing so. The same,
Yeah.
obviously, I know more numbers about clinical admin because that's what we do at Kiroku. But we
Yeah.
know that with Kiroku, we can reduce the amount of time spent on record keeping by 2/3. We're saving an hour of clinical time per day. So, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a really
How
simple
long would an
one.
average dentist take? Sorry, how long would an average
Yeah.
dentist take to kind of write up notes?
Again, so the reason why we give it as a percentage is because that varies so much from dentist to dentist and appointment type to appointment type. So if you were doing, let's say, if you're a specialist endodontist and you're doing an
Yeah.
endodontic assessment, you're going to have a much longer appointment, but you're going to also have much longer notes. But actually, the thing that's quite interesting is if you're doing lots of appointments in a day, proportionally the amount of time you spend on admin goes up massively. So we
Yeah.
calculate about a quarter of a dentist's day, when you add it up, is spent on record keeping,
Wow.
which is mind-boggling. And that's clinical time within a day.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so we know with Kiroku, if we're reducing that time, that's an hour of clinical time per day. Is that dentist going home on time? Is that dentist seeing more patients in that time? But you
Yeah.
can very quickly analyze from your associates' hourly like takings how much that time is worth. And then it allows you to actually just work out within the confines of your own practice, is
Yeah.
introducing technology like this worth it for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's something that's kind of quite close to what we're talking about. So I think there's an often a belief to many people that kind of as you're kind of working throughout any day, profit kind of accrues nice and gradually and evenly. So you turn up at 9 o'clock, see the first patient, and you get a little bit of profit. Turn up at 10 o'clock, see the next patient, you get another little bit of profit, and you get little slices of profit throughout the day. Of course, in reality, it doesn't work like that in the
Mm.
slightest. You're working from about 9 until 4:30 to cover all the costs in the
Yeah,
business there, all the running costs, all the nurse wages, reception wages, the rent, the rates, utility. You've got to pay the clinician as well within that. And then it's that last patient, you're seeing between 4:30 and 5:30 where all the profit arrives in every
yeah,
single day. So you can save, 15 minutes from writing up notes or other efficiencies as well, then it disproportionately affects your profit because you get more time to do what, you're good at as a dentist.
precisely. No, exactly. Like it's that final yards where you actually
Yeah.
um,
Win
make
or
the
lose.
profit in dentistry,
Yeah.
or like make the gains if you're exercising, whatever it is. But it's quite often that
Yeah.
final bit of pushing that will make a huge difference.
Yeah. Fantastic. Fantastic. So probably kind of bringing it all back to the beginning again there. So how
Mm,
does kind of Kiroku help with this? And what have you got to think about when you're introducing technology into
mm,
the practice? Because as you were kind of alluding to earlier, there's a cost of doing it,
yeah.
both financially and time as well.
And arguably time is one that shouldn't be overlooked, because then the cost of the time is also massive as well. So um, I think doing, like, before you're even thinking about integrating these technologies, really looking at kind of your own practice, where areas can be improved, and also the cost of not taking action. So I think it's almost like pre even engaging any of these technologies. And then once you understand which of these technologies are appropriate and solve problems within your practice, starting to really understand how that would be integrated within practice, how everyone would be trained, because getting people up to speed, I mean, we know this from kind of new hires and things like that. You need to make sure that that is as efficient as possible, because you don't want clinical like downtime or clinical inefficiency while something new is being introduced. So really understanding how the company that you are thinking about introducing within the clinical workflow, how they're approaching that training, I think is a really important element. And then and then and then just from a kind of slightly different perspective, I still think also extremely important as a clinician, really thinking through the kind of security, the data, like how those things are going to be considered by this company. So really understanding that this data is being kept really securely, that it's being, anonymized,
Yeah.
all of those things, because as clinicians, it's always our responsibility. So really understanding that, I think, is a really critical element of even considering any of these technologies. And then the final thing, which I think is, in my opinion, very, very, very important and very relevant to AI. And so any of these kind of AI technologies that you're introducing, AI is going to make an intelligent suggestion, but it is still going to be AI. And we as the clinicians, it's always going to be our responsibility to check the radiograph, or to check the clinical notes, or to, whatever it is. And so something that in my opinion is really important, shouldn't be overlooked, is how easy is it for me to review and rectify whatever the output of AI is? Because this is going to be my responsibility. And if it outputs anything that's wrong, that's still on me. So I need
Mm.
to make sure that it's as easy as possible, um, because that is going to be like critical in the day to day of how effectively this is implemented.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can definitely see that, that it never takes away kind of the expertise part of things. Well, it doesn't at this moment in time, put it that way
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Well,
that's, yeah, exactly. That's it. Like, it should still be something that is supporting the dentist, not replacing the dentist. And that review process is the important part of that, in my opinion.
yeah, fantastic. Well, I think this is just such an interesting area, and may not be the kind of the last time we speak about this, but if someone was watching this and interested, can Heroku help with this, and how would they get in contact, and what would they do next?
Yeah, it's like super simply. I think I probably haven't said in full what Kiroku does. So just very briefly, we create software that runs in a web browser, so it can work alongside whatever your practice management software is. And it doesn't have to necessarily practice wide. It can be individual dentists as well. And we create technology which is either intelligent clickable workflows, which help reduce the amount of time you're spending on record keeping and help generate really good quality notes. And we also have voice enabled note taking as well. So if you've got a microphone set up in the practice, Kiroku can listen to the clinical appointment and generate your notes in real time for you. If you are interested, just go to the website, which is trykiroku.com, and hopefully there'll be loads of information about how you can get started with a trial. You can have a free 14-day trial just to try it out.
That's fantastic, Hannah. Amazing. Like I said, may not be the last time we speak about this. I hope you don't mind me. Well, I say maybe we'll come back in 6 months' time and see what AI has developed in the meantime as well. So
Yeah.
it's amazing stuff. Well, really appreciate your time today. I feel like we scratched the surface of it a little bit. But there's great and really kind of tangible first steps that practices can make there to save those little kind of 15 minutes to 25% of the clinical time potentially you said in any one day. That has a real economic benefit to any practice or clinician. So
Mhm.
yeah, thank you very much, Hannah. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you for
time.
having me.